Everybody, good to see you this morning. I have like the tiniest micro gift from my children called a cold. You just love children. You just love them. They're giving in so many ways. So if I just hack a bit up here, just quietly from your seat, just pray. Just be like, Lord, would you just give Mingo more health than his children? Could you just pray that for me this morning? That'd be fantastic. I've got a great conversation today, but a story that you may have never heard before. In 1971, in the month of September, a group of thieves rented a storefront that was 2 doors down from Lloyd's Bank in London. And what they did in this storefront, if you take it to the next photo, right here, they rented the SAC building, which was adjacent right next to the Chicken Inn. The Chicken Inn is like London's original version of Chick-fil-A. And right next to it is Lloyd's Bank. And what these robbers did was they tunneled down 5 feet in this false storefront. They tunneled across 40 feet under the Chicken Inn, and then they came up through 3 feet of cement into the vault at Lloyd's Bank. If you go to the next photo, you can actually see the depiction. That's the vault being broken into. Go back to the one that has the 3 buildings side by side. What was interesting is they dug this tunnel entrance out of the SAC building. It was only 18 square inches, and then this is about 18 square inches right there. And then they tunneled through all the way across. You can see this depiction. And then they came up through the basement of the bank. And what they were able to steal out of the vault was just north of $71 million worth of goods, equated for like today's dollar. And they got away with it. For a little bit. What happened was there were, obviously people were, up in arms that like this bank had been broken into. There was actually there was like an amateur radio, like ham radio wave operator who was listening one random night when this bank robbery was happening, and he was listening to the radio conversations between these robbers because they were arguing whether or not they should continue to empty this vault through the night or take a break responsibly and come back the next morning and finish the job. So somebody had overheard this conversation. This bank robbery is called the walkie-talkie robbery, and the reason why they were caught is because whoever was in charge of renting the SAC building as a part of the operation of thieves accidentally leased that building under his actual name. And so they only had to do like just a little bit of information, and they were like, oh, Bob, wait a second, you're driving like a brand new Cadillac, that's weird. And so they figured out because one of the robbers put it in his original name. Everybody was caught except for 2 people. And it's like there's a movie that was made out of it called The Bank Job. And the reason why I tell you this is because despite what securities and despite what safety you think that your finances are in, there are no guarantees for how secure or how safe your possessions are when it comes to where we think they might have absolute security and absolute rest. This bank, Lloyd's Bank, was actually one of the most technologically advanced banks in London in its time. In 1971, they were one of the first banks that introduced floor sensors, so that if anybody were to walk on the floor or to impede on the floor, there would be alarms that would go off. But the bank robbers were working with the folks that were doing street work, and because there was a ton of street work and demolition happening outside of Lloyd's Bank, the bank managers decided to turn off all the floor sensors because all the jackhammering outside kept tripping the sensors inside. So for 7 straight days, the bank robbers had the capacity, the ability, without any alarms, to make their way tunneling through the bottom to get through. So you can imagine how distraught these folks were when they figured out that all of their life savings or much of their wealth had been looted. And it leads us into this verse that we get from Jesus in today's conversation, the ways of Jesus. If you're new-ish around here, we've been in this year-long conversation. We're in the end of May. We've been in it since January, the ways of Jesus, and how Jesus guides us and invites us to walk with him in a freedom that only comes from following his guidance. And today we're going to be talking about the freedom that comes from the way of generosity. We're actually going to be doing a 2-week series. It's the reason why I'm wearing a collar this morning. It's not like a full collar, like long sleeve, like your banker shirt, but I usually wear a t-shirt, and this is what I was thinking. I think I told Guy this. No, I told Zane in the back. I said, you know, at one time when I was, I think Fallon and I had been married 10 years, and I was like in the middle of like 2 car payments, a house payment. We were figuring out how we were going to send Bravery to like private school. I had a kid in my like ministry who I knew his personal life fairly well because I knew his parents. He had like moved back in with his folks, and it wasn't like he had tried to do a job that wasn't doing well, so his parents were like, hey, can you help us pray, like, you know, little Bobby out. I'll use Bobby as his fictitious name because I don't want to put him on blast. But we want to pray Bobby, like, finds his stride because he's back. He's living in the living room, and that's not super great. And then Bobby called me and was like, hey, Mingo, I want to talk to you about your financial security. And I was like, what, are you working for like an insurance company now? He's like, yep, I just love to see if I could help you guide and figure out your finances in this season of your life. And I was like, you're living with your mom, aren't you? So I knew there was there was an incompatibility in like what was trying to be given to me. Granted, they were great resources. He was selling insurance or some version of that, but if I was going to give you a little bit of guidance based on the ways of Jesus, I just want to clarify. I have a few collared shirts in my collection that I'm not going to scrub my way towards helping you figure something that you probably are very proficient in. But being around the block a few times and walking with hundreds of families through this conversation within the context of church and the context of like growing a family or trying to be wise with what God has given you, I think there's a lot that we can learn from Scripture, but I also think that there's so much biblical wisdom that we can be reminded. It's never a bad time to be reminded. So here's what I'm going to do. This week, I'm going to introduce you to the ways of generosity. Next week, I want to talk to you about how we can set our sights on seeing others and how we can participate in God's kingdom work. And then we'll move on to the next series, because every time we talk about finances, there's a segment of people in the church that start to like wiggle. They start feeling their coffee, and they're like, you know, I think I'm going to go get a refill right now. And then they go to their car and drive away. I get that. We're not going to go for like 10 long weeks on this. We're going to talk 2 weeks in conversation. And really what I'm hoping to give you is just a great reminder. My prayer as your pastor, especially when I look at the things that are happening in and around our church, is you're an extremely generous church. Like what we get to do in partnership with things like the BSCC, the Bilateral Coalition, Correlated Coalition of Helping Sex Trafficking, that organization, like, we love giving to them. You know that like when I, a few months ago, brought Christian Castro here, who's pastoring Rolando Church, that's been a relationship that we have cultivated over several years, and our church gives tens of thousands of dollars every single month to help their church make an impact in Rolando. Everything that comes to us is not for us, Torrey Pines Church. I think my prayer is that everything that comes to us, that we steward well for caring for this congregation so that your kids have a great kids ministry, so you have a great church experience, so you believe that what we give to is something worth giving through to. But our church does the same thing. We save, we spend, and then we give. And I'm so thankful that you guys are in partnership with that. I want to show you how we do that. I want to tell you the motivation behind why we do that. And then I want to give you an encouragement to consider how it looks personally yourself. That's where I'm hoping we go today. And maybe if we get through this in enough time, I may drag one of you guys on stage to show something visually. But Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 goes like this: "But store your treasures in heaven where they cannot be destroyed by moths or rust, and where thieves like those at Lloyd Bank cannot break in and steal them." He goes on and says, "But store your treasures in heaven where they cannot be destroyed by moths or rusts, and where thieves cannot break in and steal them. Your heart will be where your treasure is." In my Bible, I underlined two particular groupings of words in this verse. I underlined "store your treasures in heaven," and then I underlined "your heart will be where your treasure is." When the commandment, the way of Jesus, is to store your treasure in heaven, what he's not saying is, he's not saying, "I hope you don't have wealth in your life." He's not saying, "I hope that you don't have much in your life." Jesus is not saying, "I hope that you realize that having a savings account," he's not saying having savings is bad. Actually, we're going to talk more about how Jesus directs us in biblical wisdom. What Scripture details, though, is that the idea of storing up treasure in heaven is this challenge that we ought to find ourselves with a portion of what we have by way of finance and wealth and income, investing in God's work in parallel with the work that God is doing. And my hope is that our church helps you get access to those activities that God is doing. But I am so of the belief that when you align yourself with the Spirit of God, when you are in pursuit of the person of Jesus, that Jesus will actually start to reveal to you the things that he wants you to be generous towards, the initiatives and the opportunities, and they don't all look uniform. They don't all look the same. It's not like one perfectly aligned decision from everybody in our church. It will be a light bulb that says, "Let's give to this." The Spirit will move in our congregation, and each of us will be impressed to lead or to give in some way, shape, or form when we follow the ways of Jesus. And for some of us, it could be people that we live in proximity to. It could be a neighbor that you just go, "Man, you know what we should do? We should make dinner for them this week." It could be somebody in our community, like I'm just going to call Sammy, who's like in the lobby. "Hi, Sammy, love you." Sammy just had a baby 2 weeks ago. And so like the generosity of a congregation would be like, let's give their family like a week's worth of dinners so that they don't have to figure out meals while she's on like recovery mode from having a baby. I love that you and your baby are here. Love you guys. That's what generosity through the guidance of the Spirit looks like. Jesus says really simply, I want you to think about how you store your treasures up in heaven, how you not just invest in what is happening at a kingdom level, but how it reveals that your heart will be where your treasure is. Where do you stress, and where do you trust, and where do you hope your treasures go? What they give and what they do is really the question that we're going to go after today. Now here's some facts about what is sometimes the trigger that comes from this conversation. Because if you're a church person, or if you've been church hurt, which there are lots of church hurt people that make their way to Torrey Pines as a space to find a little bit of rest and recovery, which I love. I think it's important for you to hear a few facts about the church in order for you to rest well into this conversation, so you'd be postured well. The first is that the church is not like in a financial bind. That's really important. I'm not using this moment so that I can like get ahead in some like buried books. The church is doing really well. Actually, we steward with the best of our ability, like I had said earlier. We budget, we watch what comes in, and then we articulate every single month how we spend is only in accordance with what comes in. And I'm really proud of our team. Children's ministry, kids ministry, junior high, senior high, adult ministry, men's, women's, worship, tech, all of this. The traditional service and the modern services, and then when we combine our services, we scour our budgets so that we are financially responsible with every dollar that comes in. That's the first one. Is like we're not using this as like a Hail Mary. We need to raise X amount of money before the end of the month, or we have to like close the building. That's not where we're at. The second one is that I'm not paid on commission. So if you're like, oh, Mingo needs like a good summer run, that's not the deal. Like, I have a fixed salary, and it's like the church tripled in size. My income wouldn't triple with it. I'm not like a commission-based whatever. Maybe there are some pastors that do that, and whatever. That's not how or who I am. I came in, and it's been that way, and I've just enjoyed that spot as long and as much as we've done the church. So if you're like, hey, what's Mingo trying to do here? I still drive a 17-year-old Toyota Highlander. The bumper's kind of falling off. It's good. I fixed the air conditioner so it doesn't squeal when I start the car. The third one is like, I don't have like this like worldwide like ministry impact, and I need like to finance the like jet that's going to go do that ministry. Like, my jet's just fine. So don't worry about any of those things. The goal of our series is really simply this: to align our faith and our finances so that we can really live in God's freedom. That's the hope. Everything that we've talked about all year long has been aligning things in our lives to the person and the Spirit of God. That's really all that we've talked about. And what's really funny is this weekend I was watching Nico ride his bike at the house, and I had gotten up late because I wasn't feeling super well, and the boys were riding around the backyard. We have like this kind of like loop. They go around the front and around the back, and I watched Bravery go by on his bike, and then I watched Nico go by on his bike, but he was riding with the handlebars like kind of like crooked. You ever see that? But like the wheel is straight, but the handlebars are like off pitch. So Nico's like trying to get after Bravery, but he's literally riding crooked, trying to go straight, and it like doesn't make sense when he straightens his handlebars, he goes straight into the fence, right? And so this is it's out of alignment that Nico has just gotten used to riding his bike, and I'm like, dude, I'm like a terrible dad. Nico, stop riding the bike all funky. Let me get out there and fix it. And then you do the cool dad move. You're like, pinch the tire between your legs. You know what move I'm talking about, right? And you're like, watch this. Oh, and you straighten it out, and Nico's like, dude, you're like the Hulk. And I'm like, I really am. But it's like, no tools needed. You look so cool when you do it. You're just like, let me just fix this for you, Nico. And then he's like, you're the best. And then he goes chasing around. A lot of us have lived our lives in the category of finances, riding a crooked model, not having clarity that there is actually a better setup for how Jesus articulates in biblical wisdom how we ought to like live our lives when it comes to our finances. And this is really the hope, is that we align our faith and our finances so that we can live in God's freedom. And the reason why we're even talking about that, not because the church needs money, not because I need a jet, not because I'm commission-based, but if you have been paying any attention to like the economic like macro story in our society right now, there are plenty of uncertainties. We've been like in this, are we not recession? Is it not happening? Like the markets are like all like this. If you have been waiting to buy a house, you've been like waiting and waiting and waiting, and you're thinking that this is going to be the right time. Rent's going up. The price of eggs is the cost of a car. Like, there's plenty of unknowns and things that are causing tension, and this will help you. My hope, my prayer, is that the biblical wisdom that we haul out of this conversation this morning will help you in your faith discover freedom really in any financial season. I know, being married 16 years now, having a job since I was 15, there are plenty of seasons that you go through when it comes to your finances. There is a season when you are single and an individual, and you're just figuring out if you can make it in a job that could turn into a career. I remember you get your first kind of like real paycheck. You're like, well, I'm rich. And then it goes as fast as it comes in. You meet your significant other, or you're in a season where there's a significant other, and all of a sudden there's like a bump in like your income, but then you realize there's also like the equal amount of like debt. I remember when Fallon and I started dating, I was like, oh my gosh, we can both make money. That'll be awesome. How much student debt do you have? That was like the unexpected thing. We determined that like our debt was going to take us 13 years to pay off when we got married. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're just going to live in my parents' backyard in a tent. We're going to try to do it. And I remember literally this last year, we paid off the last student loan for our like whole, everything that we had gone through in college, following a lot of these principles that we're going to go over today. You go single and you're making money, you meet your significant other, maybe you get married and you're living. We have a name for you if you are like, if you're married and you have no kids, you know the word, it's like a slur. We call them dinks. Yeah, we hate them, right? Double income, no kids, whatever, right? You just have all the money you want. You can buy all the Chick-fil-A and like you can DoorDash till like the cows come home. Then kids come into the situation. All of a sudden you've got like this big old finance hole in your boat. And you're like, what happened here? You've got kids that stay with you 18, 19, 21, 25 years. They're still on your payroll, if you know what I'm talking about, right? Then you're in maybe your max mode of income, but you're also in your max mode of spending. It's like there's the most coming in that you've ever had in your career, and it's also the most going out because your kids are playing sports, because they have interests in things like expensive hobbies, because they get sick, or there's unexpected expenses that come your way, or their kid wants to buy a class ring that you know he'll never wear, but like, oh, he's got to have one, right? I'm only saying that because I did all of those things to my parents. And we did not grow up having a lot, and yet there was like that reality. Then some of us make our way, or kids make our way out. You're empty nesting. You're now not just paying for children, you're paying for grandchildren. That's the gift that keeps on giving. You may end up on a fixed income. That's the beauty of who and what our church is representing, and yet there is wisdom for every season that we find ourselves in these different times in our lives. And here's what I'm hoping the outcome is going to be. That we can unhinge from the fear from money. Some of us are like, I don't know what's coming or how we're going to fill in the blank. I want to unhinge that. I also want to detach this false hope that we can put in money. That it's going to deliver something for us that only God can do. So I've got these 3 lanes, and I'm going to unpack these for us today. These lanes about these different seasons. The first one is financial hardship. This is where we find ourselves in a moment where we don't have enough for the basic needs in our life, where there are things that you need to cover, but you are really struggling to know how those things will get covered. I'm not talking about the basic wants in life. That's different. The basic needs are like food, shelter, and well-being, the things that will keep you healthy and keep you alive. Those financial hardships that we find ourselves in, they are not exempt from any of us. We've all been in a financial hardship season. And here's what I want to do. I want to give you 3 guide kind of posts. I want to tell you the enslaving lie that comes our way when we are in this season. And then I want to tell you a liberating truth. And then I want to tell you an intentional practice. The enslaving lie when we are in a financial hardship season is that money can save me. Like if I'm in a pinch so hard and I don't know what's going to happen, if I just got more money, then I would be okay. I would be saved if I could just amass a little bit more. And we've probably all been in this boat where you're like thinking of the better off aunt or uncle or family member that you're going to make that like brave phone call to and be like, Aunt Carol, I want to know if you'd be willing to invest in my life for the next fill in the blank, right? You're hoping to return something to them, but in reality, you know your situation is like you don't have enough. For whatever reason, the expenses in your life versus the income in your life, there is a gap there. And you're trying to present, you go fish out and find the collared shirt in your closet, and you're like, I'm going to ask a big deal. I'm going to ask for coverage. And I don't know if they're going to say yes or not, but I need this right now. You might believe the enslaving lie that money is going to be the thing that saves you. But you want to know what the liberating truth is? It's such an easy answer. The liberating truth is that only God can save you. You may be thinking super short term or so small that the thing that can save you is the dollar amount that's in your mind, when in reality you have access and connection to a holy God that can provide so much more than a particular dollar amount that you might be hoping for in your life. God is the only person who can save you from anything that you ever find yourself in. God, out of the book of Psalms, is recognized by this statement. It's not in your notes, but Psalms 121, if you want to hold and have this great reminder, the writer of Psalm 121 says, "My help comes from the Lord." It says, He's the maker of heaven and earth. My help comes from the Lord only. He doesn't say my help is going to come from that next advanced paycheck, that next loan from somebody who's been so generous in giving to me. It's too shallow of a thought to think that if I get more money, then I will be saved. Fallon, my wife, she's obsessed with like all things royal family. She loves the Queen. God rest her soul. Every year, for some reason, over the last couple of years, that there was something big happening in London, she was like, I've got to get there. But then she was pregnant with Lively, and then I had this conference, and I ended up in London right when like that royal baby was born. And she was like, I hate you. Go take a picture of the bridge. And so like at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was like, is this the bridge you're talking about? It was like all lit up because like it was like the color of the baby born. They do that stuff. I just wanted to eat good food. But Fallon was like obsessive about seeing the royal baby. She wanted to go to the Jubilee when the Queen's Jubilee was going down. And then, dang it, another conference had me out in London. And I was like, there's all this scaffolding all over the street, and I can't get to the dumb building where I'm supposed to be meeting all these other pastors. And she's like, because the Queen's Jubilee, dummy. And I was like, oh, is this like, she was like, I am so mad about you doing this, always here right now. That's the level of obsession my wife has with the royal family. I was thinking last night about that phrase, God save the Queen. You know that phrase? They use it now for the new king insult, God save the king. It's been instituted. It's written into the national anthem that reminds everybody who is a citizen in that kingdom that nothing can save their most precious person except for God. Now, I thought it was really interesting that they say, God save the king, God save the queen. It was actually written in 1685. That was when those words were written into this, this song that became the national anthem. They were being attacked, I think, by France, was like impeding on England, and they were leaning on inspiring their people to be reminded that they will not lose although they are under attack. And so this writer didn't write, the wealth of our nation save the king, the crown treasury and the crown jewels save the king. They didn't say the army, the most powerful military in the European world, that will save the king, that will save the queen. No. The author wrote, God save the queen. Even though they had everything that they could deploy to how they were being attacked, it was still with great certainty that becomes their national anthem, this reality that money doesn't save us when we're in distress, but it's actually God. It's the liberating truth that only God can save us when we're in distress. So what's the intentional practice? Really simply, if you find yourself in a church like ours, the hope is that you would share your need if you find yourself in a season of financial hardship. What this means is like when we talk about things like Guy had brought it up, like when we do membership class, when we do starting steps, that's how you become a member at our church. It connects you to things like growth groups and gives you access to things like classes where we talk about how to best budget and how to get connected to like all those wise expressions with what God has trusted you with. When we see people who come through our church who are experiencing hardship when it comes to finances, or any hardship for that matter, relational hardship or career hardship, it's our pleasure, it is our responsibility to share in that burden with you. And we have things like a benevolence fund. We have a network of churches that will help you if you are in this real financial hardship. It's one of the things that I'm so thankful for a church that stewards its finances well, is that we have a bucket in our line item that says if you are experiencing like this great emergency, our church can be somebody who can help you within reason. Like I can't make your BMW payment for you, But I can help you kind of look at the landscape of your finances and help you make a great decision in parallel with the community here. The other thing that I want to encourage you to do is to share your need without guilt. Like, there's no reason why you should feel like shame or guilt in this space on this topic. There's plenty of you who will tell me, hey man, my love life is like a crazy dumpster fire. No guilt there, no shame there. You just need God to intervene in a big way. This is the same way when it comes to like the hardships that you experience financially. The other thing is I want you to share it with God, and I want you to share it with great specificity with God. There's so many great things. Last week we talked during Mother's Day about how God hears us, God sees us, and God knows what's going on with us. But his greatest joy is when you bring a specific prayer to him so that he can answer that prayer very specifically. Lord, I really need you to come through on this thing that I'm trying to make an increase in my job. Lord, I'm trying to put this career pathway together, and I cannot do it without your help. That's the specificity that I hope you understand Jesus invites you into when it comes to these seasons of financial hardship. Be specific about the prayer so that he can be specific in that blessing. Here's the number 2 season, a season of financial uncertainty. This is like when bills are okay and they're being paid, but you're not sure about like future events or future things. That you've got enough responsibility and you've got kind of a handle about what the like week to week and month to month expenses are, but you know that there's like some uncharted waters ahead, right? You're adding to your family, you're expanding like the mouths in your lineup now, or you're now trying to figure out how you're going to bump your kids from elementary school to junior high, or from junior high to high school, from high school into a college that you don't know necessarily they even care to go to, but you know that there's still like a tuition attached to it. Maybe you're like in that mode where you're having to figure out, okay, now we need to kind of expand and connect more things. Financial uncertainty is something that meets us all in a challenging space. And here's the first thing I'm going to tell you when you get to this space. It's actually connected to the bottom intentional practice of the last point. Kelly, if you can pull that one up, it's do whatever it takes to create margin. I actually like this inside of the financial uncertainty bucket. Do whatever it takes to create margin. This is, let me give you an example of what this is. This is like, I know that it's going to be a thin month, but man, my Guatemalan organic 5-pound subscription that comes to my door every day for my favorite coffee, I can't live without that. And I'm going to say, maybe you can. Do whatever it takes to create margin. Right? You're like, oh man, I finally leased the car of my dreams, but man, it sucks to live in it. Maybe you need to do whatever it takes to create some margin, right? You might be asking yourself like, man, Mingo, I want to like amass these things and I'm on my way to living my perfect life. My dream board that I have like posted up in my bedroom closet, it's got all these things on it. And I'm just telling you, maybe the season of financial hardship doesn't have you like cashing in on all of those dreams yet. You might need to have a season where you create some margin in order to rightly align the season you're in with how God is leading you through this moment. That's all I'm saying when it comes to actual financial uncertainty. But here's the enslaving lie for this season of financial uncertainty. The enslaving lie is that money is actually going to offer certainty. The enslaving lie in a season of financial uncertainty is that money is going to offer certainty. And here's what I'd ask you to do. I wrote in my own notes, compare your certainty stations with the time and the attention you put on asking the Lord to bring you the kind of peace and the kind of certainty that he promises he brings. So here's a certainty station for me personally. Fallon and I have like 2 accounts, not hers and mine, but we have essentially like, we have this account that is our savings account and kind of our life account, all the housing and bills. And then we have like the monthly kind of everyday things. And what I do incessantly when I'm not sure, when I'm not certain about how the month is going because I'm like falling back on the budget or I'm not paying attention to our expenses, I will obsessively, like 2 times a day, be checking on both of those accounts, hoping that it gives me a sense of peace by just looking at the numbers. And Fallon will catch me sometimes and be like, babe, we've been in the house all day. Those numbers are not going to change. Like, they are not getting any bigger, and they're hopefully not going to get any smaller. But you looking at them incessantly isn't going to make you feel any better. Anybody feel that way? Your certainty is not going to come from looking at things like your 401k. Anybody ever obsessively look at that sucker over, I don't know, like the last 4 years? It's been like the wildest roller coaster ever. You're like, oh my gosh, we can retire. Oh my gosh, that application to McDonald's isn't looking too bad. 2008, did anybody take a hit in 2008? I know my family, my parents, I was living with them while I was going to college. My family lost their home in 2008. So the idea that money offers certainty is one of the greatest lies that you get tricked into, thinking if I just can have some of this in my pockets or click to quickly look at the like number in the bank account with a comma, then I feel good. But in reality, the liberating truth is that only God is certain. It sounds so simplistic, but here's the reality is that only God's love is certain. Only God's mercy is certain. His purpose for you is certain. His grace, His goodness to His followers, that is all certain. And in reality, security is ultimately going to come from implementing His biblical wisdom. That is where real certainty is held, grasped, is not in the amount that you might be able to get on the 15th and the 1st, but in this certainty that God is who He claims to be. That if He is loving, and if He is gracious, and if He is good, and if He is all-providing, then that is what I want to hold on to, not the wayward, fluctuating amounts that I might have flowing through any of the accounts that I have access to. So what's the intentional practice? The intentional practice is this idea. Give, save, spend. Give, save, spend. It's the inverse of what society tells you to do with the things that you've earned. Society will tell you, when you get it, you have the right to spend it and go enjoy how you spend it. And then if you're keen enough to remember, actually save some of it after you have a bunch of fun with it. And then if there's anything left, go please be charitable with it. But it's the opposite. It's the upside-down world that Jesus invites us to that actually gives us the most liberating freedom. He says, actually, what I want you to do is I want you to inverse this. I want you to give first. I want you to save second. I want you to responsibly pay future you by saving. And then with what you've got left, I want you to spend it and enjoy it and have a ball with it. And this is always where it catches us as a community. So I have a visual, and I'm going to give you this as a clarifying, like, whoa, that maybe makes more sense here. And Adam, you're always my guy, so just come on up. Adam, I like pray in the mornings that you're going to be at church on the days when I do like a visual thing. So Jesus gives us all of the things that we have, right, Adam? Right. Okay, good. So this is going to represent all the things that you have. Just catch that. Okay, these are all glass, by the way, so don't miss these. So he gives us 2, 3, that's 3 things. I would throw 4 and 5 at you, but I don't want them to shatter. These are like God's goodness to you by way of like your family income, right? These are, I'm just going to stack these here. Yep. You're good. That's, and then under the chin maybe, right there. That's perfect. Okay, just rotate this way. You're good. I trust you. This is your month. This is what God gives you in your month. It's 10 things, right? And when I say 10, 10, 80, this is 10 things. Adam, can I have one of those things? Which one of those things would you like me to take?
Any of them.
Okay, cool. I'm going to take this one off the finger. This is the one that God says, hey, when you get 10 representing all of your income, I just want one of these. you still get all of that, which is awesome. And it still maybe looks a little overwhelming to manage, but you're doing a decent job. Now, wisdom would say that you can actually take this one and you can pay your future self. It's called savings, right? It's the responsible thing to do when you have the total amount of what you've got is to take a percent to give back to God. They call that a tithe. That's 10%. Another 10% is to pay future you. That's called savings. And you can do with it later what you want. But look at how much is left in Adam's hands. The Bible says that that's actually what you get to spend by God's goodness. His goodness is that you get to use all of this to pay your bills, take your wife out, enjoy, buy nice things, go get whatever you want to do, be responsible with it. But this is all that God says you get to have. It's yours. Use it, enjoy it. I blessed you with it. But man, we get into this conversation about tithing and saving, and you're like, wait a second, that's a lot that God wants from me. But in a weird way, it actually feels good to be holding less, doesn't it? It's weird, and it's upside down. But in reality, all that Adam is holding is actually all God's anyways. He's just gifting it to you. So I'm going to put this up here one by one. Just walk this way with me. Don't drop any of those because I have one more service to do the same thing. This represents the sum total of all the things that you are going to manage in any given month. And here's what I'm telling you. It's not outlandish. Thank you, Adam. It's not outlandish that God would say, set this one aside for me and set this one aside for future you, and then you get all of these to use by my blessing when you're in pursuit of me. Does that make sense to you? Because, man, when it comes my way, this 10, 10, 80 wisdom, give 10 back to God as a thank you for all that he gives me consistently in my life. Give 10 to savings, which is paying future you. That's responsible. That's not even going away. This is in your own management just as a key set so that in the future you have access to it. And then the Bible says live off of all of that. That's biblical wisdom. It's great to see it because sometimes when we're presented with this idea of a tithe, 10%, we go, there's no way I can adjust to that. But in reality, it's pretty doable, especially for our congregation. And I don't know what season you're in, whether it's financial uncertainty or it's financial hardship, but God is inviting you to partner with him in a season of trust, but also in a season of investing in his greater kingdom, which takes us to this third space, financial stability and comfort. Eventually, you find yourself here in seasons, and the enslaving lie when you are comfortable in finance is that all of it is mine. That's the lie that the enemy tries to get you to believe. Is like, I made it. I got all these. Don't try to touch them. I put them under lock and key. Thank you very much. But it's a lie. All of it belongs to God in the first place. He's the one that gifted you with the wisdom to be able to make that earning. He's the one that gave you the great idea that afforded you the position. He's the one that gave you the favor so that you could beat out the competition. He's the one that gave you the ability to align your abilities and capacities with that job that now connects you with an income. Your expertise is his gift to you. So then his gift of income is his gift to you. The question is, do you see it as all yours? Do you get caught in that enslaving lie? Or do you have this understanding of this liberating truth that everything is actually God's? My kids remind me of this all the time. I've been rebuilding this bike for Bravery, and we've been investing in it. Like, we've been investing in it. Dad has been buying the money for the things. But Bravery's been along the ride. He's like helping me fix it and do it along the way. And what I love about Bravery is that he's so gung-ho about it. And then I'm like, hey, do you want to pay your part for the things that we just bought on eBay and Amazon? Like, that would be pretty awesome, right? I don't need the money. I don't need Bravery's like lemonade money, but I do want to train him to be responsible for the things that he is like wanting to have like a portion of, ownership of. And Bravy's like, oh, Dad, I was thinking about buying some Prime actually, right? It's a stupid drink that he wants to buy, right? Coconut water, 10%, so dumb. And so I'm like, actually, we bought calipers and a new motor and upgraded suspension and forks for your bike. but you want to spend it on a drink. Prime, you owe Poppy some like portion to this great gift that you've been enjoying so much this weekend. Trying to get him to go along with this. The beauty is that Bravery this weekend literally busted the bike, one small dumb part. And he was like, I can't fix it. I don't have enough money or enough know-how to fix the thing that I broke. And I was like, you know what's awesome is I do. And at the end of the day, you know whose bike that is anyways? He's like, it's really yours. And I'm like, exactly. But you know the beauty is that you get to participate with me in this, and at the end of the day, you think that like what's in your lunchbox is going to be the end of all money for you to buy Prime. That's going to keep coming because you have a dad who loves you a ton, who doesn't want to keep you from these great experiences, but also wants you to understand that there is a rhythm that makes our family who our family is, and it's not by hoarding the stuff that we have. I want you to see that. I want you to start sharing with your brother first. Then I want you, when your friends come over, that you don't like show off to them, but you share with them. Because what that does is it speaks to something greater than who we are. It speaks to something greater than what we have. It speaks to the character and the nature of the person that we submit our lives to. It's big, Bravery. It's huge. And he was having like this big aha moment. And then he's like, but we should still get Prime, right? And I'm like, yeah, sure. The intentional practice when we find ourselves in stability is this idea that we enjoy God's blessings and we do it without guilt because we're living inside of God's intended wisdom when it comes to our finances. That you don't feel guilty about how you enjoy what God has blessed you with. But the invitation is that you would rightly divide the things that are part that he asks for in worship. The tithe is the 10% back. That's what we say, like percentage giving is the best posture when it comes to your generosity because it's hard for some of us to think, whoa, 10% is a major hit. But maybe you can start with 3% or 5%. And then you would trust the Lord to show you his faithfulness as you segment out what he has blessed you with already. The reality is everything is God's, and the intentional practice is that God wants you to enjoy his blessings, and he wants us all to continually grow in generosity. It's not that you hit this level and then that's it, but that you, as he trusts you with more, you understand it as not a guilt that you are getting more, but a responsibility that you get to steward more of. That's the hope. That's my hope for my own family. It's my hope for my own kids. It's my hope for myself. It's the hope for our church. I'll show you this video, and then I'll close with this last thought. The video is like 2 minutes. Watch this guy from Eastlake.
Hi, my name is Merrick. My wife, Janice, and I have been attending church here with our 3 daughters for the last 6 years. Well, growing up, I'd passed by Eastlake Church for years, and I was never really curious. I lived a few blocks away for about 15 years, and I never stepped in. But some Uber drivers said she drove from Vista all the way down to our church. And I was like, man, I'm only a few blocks away, and I can't step into church. That was a week later, I stepped into church. For the first 2 years, we would actually get here a little bit late to the 12:45 service at the time. And honestly, we did that on purpose because the worship was new to us, but also it meant that we got to skip the part about generosity, which made me uncomfortable back then. I remember my wife and I were in service one day, and they were talking about this ministry down in Zona Norte in Tijuana, and we both started crying to see the impact that the church has down there. And at that point, I'd already seen in our own family what was going on in our lives and how there was ministry for my daughters and for us. And it hit me. There had to be thousands of families that were giving in order for me to step in to these ministries. I wanted to be a part of this movement. I wanted to give. I didn't feel right anymore not to. I knew that God was doing great things through our church and our leadership. I could see they weren't misspending the resources, that they were good stewards. At first, we had to create a good budget, make sure that when more money did come, we were better stewards of it. And then we were able to start giving a little bit more. It's not a straight line to getting to your 10%. It wasn't for us. For some people, it may
I feel like it'd still be good to finish with it. It'll put us over like 10 minutes maybe.
It's not just
Once you
about
load
providing
it down. Yeah.
on a monthly basis and being consistent there. But there'll be other opportunities there's families that could be like my family 6 years ago that are going to show up for the first time. And now we get to be the families that came before them and that give and build into the future of our communities.
Merrick's story matters because it's been the investments over the years from Eastlake Church that it's helped actually bring revitalization in ministry back to this church. 5 years ago, this church was like 5 to 7 years ago. We've been here for about 5.5. This church needed a major infusion and investment to re-spark the ministry that's been happening here. So what Merrick was saying about like seeing the goodness of ministry happening in other places has been the fortitude that's reignited so much goodness for this ministry here. And what I love is that now this ministry is creating that fortitude for a ministry over in Rolando. Like we're now making that forward investment so that people who are showing up in Rolando Church are showing up with the generosity that's coming through and pouring out of this church, overflowing onto that church. It's this fantastic cycle of paying it forward. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you one actionable item, one step to go forward. And I'm going to ask every single one of us to find ourselves in one of these 3 lanes. The first, and it's represented in this generosity ladder. We talk about this in our membership class briefly, is that there are plenty of us who have like arrived at Torrey Pines Church and we participate in ministry, but we've yet to participate in this portion of our worship. We are asking for you to consider what it looks like to go from nothing to something, from giving nothing to enjoying the ministry, to participating in it in parallel with so many of us, to think between you and God what that looks like, and to give something. It's real simple. That you decide, not in a pressure point, but over the next 2 weeks, what does that look like to partner in generosity? The second step for some of us is that you'd go from something to something specific, and we call that something specific tithing. That's where we kind of busted this visual down, where there's this idea of giving 10%. And if 10% is a lot, which I understand, that you would prayerfully consider what percentage you would trust God with on a regular basis, representing your tithe. That is a huge step in being this complete whole person. If I could pastor you through this moment, it would be that so many of us are asking these massive things from God, but God is asking of you this whole person, this complete person. And for a lot of us, they say the last thing to get saved is our wallet, right? We want God to cover us in all these ways, but we're like, oh, Lord, this is a tough one. Yes. Why is it 10%? I have no idea. You can ask God. It's in the Old Testament. When you see him, ask him for me also. Maybe he knows that that's like the tipping point where it's like just hard enough. But every year that Fallon and I have done this, we've done this since we've been married, and I did it before we were married, his faithfulness has never left us needing where he didn't show up and supply what it was that we needed. It is his faithfulness on display, his glory on display. That's our opportunity for some of us this morning, is that you go from something to something specific, a tithe. And then this last one is like the real generosity bell ringers. You go from something specific to something sacrificial. It's like from tithe to real abundant generosity. And when you have more than you need and you sense that God is doing something good in the ministry you're connected to, that you decide, I want to go and I want to partner with it in whatever direction it's going. And like I said, it could be unique through this church. It might be something that God has already placed in front of you that you're like, you know what, we need to do this. And it may have nothing to do with the church. But I do want to invite all of us to participate in examining this in our own lives. So I'm going to put this challenge up. We do it every single year for our entire network, this 90-day generosity challenge. And it just says over the next 3 months that you'd be really insistent on examining how God has gifted you and how you are utilizing that to invest in his kingdom. If you scan that QR code, it'll take you to one of those 3 steps. You can literally say, I'm going to go from nothing to something. I'm going to go from something to something specific like tithing, or I'm going to go from something specific to something sacrificial, and I'm going to give a generous gift. And I want this to be something that walks and welcomes you into this deeper level of connectedness with God. If it's uncomfortable, awesome. It helps. It helps move you closer to that pursuit of who Jesus is. And if it's something that you're holding with like white knuckles, it may be the first time in your life that you go, okay, Lord, I want to see you move mightily in this area. I don't have much, but what I have, I want to trust you with. This is the invitation. You can scan the QR code. You can go to torreypines.church/90day, and you can find the same link there. Just select our church location, Torrey Pines Church, and let God do that moving work. If you sign up, we're going to give you a book next week, and we'll walk with you in this season. You'll get a couple of email encouragements from me, and I want to see what God does over the next 90 days as we trust him with this segment of our life. Next week, we're going to talk about how we identify who God wants to be generous towards. That'll be a different conversation. I'll probably wear a tie for that one. It should be pretty good. But let me pray for us, and then we'll close with this worship song together. Jesus, thank you for not excluding some of the most, what seems like, touchy points of our lives, Lord. Our finances and our wealth and our income, Lord. Those are within your control also. And God, as we looked at the visual of 10 things being balanced by Adam, Lord, that we would have enough trust that we could give one of them back to you. Lord, that we'd have the wisdom and responsibility to put one aside for our future needs. Lord, that we would live with great confidence knowing that you've blessed us with this 80% that we could leverage and love and enjoy. Lord, would you meet us individually? Would we respond honestly? And Lord, would you fill our hearts as we continue to pursue you in a way that only you can fill us? We love you. In your name I pray. Amen. Would you guys stand with us as we close with this last song?